Hi, my name is Dave Reske, CEO of Now Speed Marketing, and welcome to this edition of Marketing in the Now, where we focus on uncovering the myths of marketing and leadership with some of the world's most interesting people. And my guest today is Shannon Curran. Shannon is a fractional CMO and an expert in B2B SaaS marketing with over 13 years of experience. Shannon, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
So you've had a lot of experience in B2B and SaaS. Is that your favorite industry? Did you kind of like make a deliberate decision to go B2B, or did you explore other channels, or how did you kind of go in that direction?
Yeah, it chose me. No, I'm just kidding. So I started my career so my 13 plus years of experience are just in marketing in general. My SaaS experience is around 8, right? So I started my career in healthcare and nonprofits and then moved into higher ed to get my MBA for free. And then halfway through my MBA, I decided that tech was really the way I wanted to go. So I got my first tech job as a content marketer at a Vista equity portfolio company called QuickBase that's based in Boston. And I grew really quickly there, which was awesome. I started the content marketing function and then built out brand and brand programs and integrated campaigns, and then moved on to a venture capital firm where that only invested in B2B software. So as you can see, there's a trend here. And then made my way into an early stage Series A to be the VP of marketing at a B2B rev tech company. And then after that, decided I wanted to go out and start my own consulting business to work with lots of early stage founders to help grow their businesses. And yeah, so I'm not sure if I will be B2B forever, but I really love the complexity of the sale, the fact that you have to have a lot of business acumen to understand how to market well in B2B. And I like making boring things more interesting. So I think that there's definitely something there for that too.
Well, you've done a lot of that, and the topic that we've been talking about is really related to social media and helping early stage companies grow. And we've been talking extensively about really the role of the founder in social media and getting the founder's brand out there. And the idea that if you want to build the founder's brand, really it has to be on LinkedIn. Is that your experience? Is that the best way to build a brand for the founder and the best channel to use?
So glad you asked. So my answer is no. I think that LinkedIn is certainly a channel that many folks use to build personal brand, right? You see it all the time. You look at my LinkedIn. That is where I do that, right? And the reason why I do it there is because my ICP, who I'm selling to, they're on that channel, right? So they are founders, they're other CMOs or CROs of software companies. And, probably 80% of my business comes from LinkedIn. But if you are a founder of a vertical software company selling into manufacturing, I don't think LinkedIn is your channel. And I think there's uh, a lot of want to not build a personal brand for some founders because they don't want to build on LinkedIn. They don't want to be a thought leader on that channel. And what I tell them often is you don't have to be, and nor should you be. The way that we should look at this is, what is your differentiated opinion? Why did you start this business that is solving a problem for a certain group of people? And then we build what I call a watering hole map, which is, where are those people? Well, who do they go to? And what do they go to? What channels do they go to learn, to solve problems, to become solution aware, problem aware? And that's where we're going to activate your personal brand. So it's different for every single company. And sure, if you're selling MarTech, RevTech, HR tech, I hate to break it to you, you're going to end up on LinkedIn. But if you're not, then that certainly doesn't need to be a part of your content mix or your channel strategy.
So we're going to explore all that in a little more depth, but let's just take a little bit of a step back and just talk about the idea of the personal brand for the CEO. Does the CEO need to be a person of influence, or can they just rely on the marketing and the sales function to get it out there? Today, does the CEO need to be the celebrity spokesperson for the company? And if they do, how important really is that?
So I think there's a nuanced answer to this. I will say that my answer in general is yes, but the way that you go about it doesn't need to look a very specific way. Like you use the term celebrity spokesperson, and I think that has a certain connotation, right? That you are gregarious and charismatic and you're out in on stages and speaking. I don't think that's necessarily what the founder and CEO has to be doing. I think some of the greatest founders are product people, right? Some of them are quiet and they just love to build really wonderful technology that supports and grows businesses. And for those folks, they still have a personal brand. In theory, we all do, right? Whether you're controlling it and building it or not, like your experience with me is my personal brand, right? Like you are experiencing me, I am experiencing you, and I see certain characteristics about you that define who you are and define a brand. So I think the most critical part about specifically early stage founders is I like to ask them all the question of why does it matter? Why is the work that you're doing matter? And if they don't have a really great answer to that and they don't have a super passionate answer, then we have a bigger problem. But you really think that the brand is built from that, right? Like someone asked me last week, I was at a bunch of events last week, and someone asked me who are my favorite companies to work with. And it is always the founders that are just so obsessed with solving a problem for a specific group of people. And they've gotten to know that group of people so well that they understand and can anticipate the needs that they have. Typically, there's two kind of groups of founders. There's those, and then there's the ones that just really love cool tech and want to build like awesome technology. And those ones have to kind of find product market fit. They have to find who could buy their technology. But I just love working with founders that are super focused on solving a specific problem for a specific group of people. And that's a super long-winded answer to say to you, yes, they have to be able to speak to that, right? And especially at the beginning, there's founder-led sales, there's all these things. They're already doing it. They don't need to be a celebrity, but they certainly do need to have a perspective on why what they're doing matters.
So let's say you find that CEO who's obsessed with solving a problem and they're really passionate about their community and they're really out there, but they're invisible really today. They just really have just not done much on LinkedIn. They've obviously done things to build their own community. They're a CEO, they're a leader of their company. Maybe they've raised capital, maybe not. But you want to help them develop a personal brand. How do you start? Where does it kind of
Mm-hmm.
start from?
Sure. So it starts with really digging into their belief system and their value set, understanding who they are as a person, as well as so some folks are more willing to share about themselves personally than they are about themselves professionally. I don't think it's a requirement that you do either one, but it is wonderful. It is important to be authentic to who you are. So if you're when you meet someone out at a restaurant, if you're going to immediately tell them all these personal things about yourself, then that is a part of your brand and you should continue to do that for your company, right? So we dig into a few things. A few questions I love to ask to get their brain like really thinking is, what is one thing in your industry that everyone believes that you don't? And another one is, what was the reason you pulled the trigger on building a company? So if they left their job, like what was that day like? What did that day look like? And what did the next day look like? And when you wake up in the morning, what's the first thing you think about? And things like that. There's definitely a few questions to get them into like really thinking about who they are as a differentiated perspective. So I do that and I build kind of what I call platform for them. So, and by me, I mean, I facilitate the build, right? Because they're really doing it for themselves. And then we talk about where their customers are. So your customers, so a lot of the, like, I know I just talked about verticals, but a lot of like the manufacturing and construction folks, like they're really, really trade show focused still. So making sure that this brand is being activated in those trade shows, right? And normally you'd think this seems actually common sense when I start to explain it because that's like how you do marketing, right? Like that is how you would do marketing. But people often forget that the founder is a person, right? And people are buying from people. People are selling to people. So how do they have a more memorable platform at these activation points? So is your audience in communities? Like, are you selling developer tools? Like you're getting on those forums. Like it's just happening, right? Like you have to be there, right? And then we start to activate. And sometimes, depending on your business model, if you're really high ACV, so say you're selling enterprise software, it's like six-figure deals, long sales cycle. Actually, one-to-one or one-to-few activations for a personal brand are excellent, right? Like, how do you do small dinners, small activations, high-level gifting, one-on-one travel, things like that? That can work really well. If you're a PLG product, you're obviously going to have to go a little bit more for virality, and that's a very different strategy of where your founder needs to be. So really thinking about it as an integrated marketing strategy and not just a like take the PR person and get them in the Wall Street Journal, right? It's a little bit more thoughtful than that.
Yeah, no, I love it. And I love the your approach that really starts with a personal story, understanding where they're coming from, their core motivations, and then building that into their brand and how they're telling that story. And then focusing it really on the platforms where their customers are. The other thing that you said that was really powerful that struck me is that depending on who the customer is, you're taking radically different strategies. It's not just one cookie cutter tweet or post a week that goes out, right? The high-end gifting, the events, those kinds of things can be really different depending on what you're doing. How do you get to the point where you understand their market well enough to figure out where their customers are and where the CEO should be engaging at that level? Because that intersection seems like it's really critical. That insight that you get has got to be critical.
Absolutely. And I think this is where it works great to have the founder lead this is in all of the founders' conversations with customers, asking these questions, right? Like this is a really critical part of just being curious as a founder. So it is a lot of trial and error. If you're really early stage, you only have like 2, 3 customers, you're trying to figure this out. You're asking your peers, trying to see like where they're activating. It's bumpy, right? But as you start to get a really clear understanding of your customer relationship and they have a lot of respect for you and you're giving them a lot of value, I've never experienced them not wanting to tell you these things, right? Like they will say, I had a customer, I was working with a client recently, and their customers told them, well, honestly, we just buy what our peers buy. And I was like, of course you do, because you're a CIO. Like that's what they do.
Hmm.
So if your whole strategy is not building peer to peer networks that you are at the center of driving value and being really present, then I don't care how many ads you put out. Like it's just simply not going to work. Right. And so really getting to the point of interviewing both ICP folks, so people that aren't your customers, but are the right ICP, and then your current customers will help you get a pretty good understanding and then start to test channels one at a time, right? That's the thing about early stages. You're not launching a multi-channel, like super large campaign that's going to go for 6 months and then you'll evaluate if it works. It's like you're launching one channel at a time and you're figuring out where you start to stick and then you're beginning to optimize and grow.
Yep. So for early stage companies, that seems to really make sense where you've got, you're
Mhm.
trying one channel at a time and you've got, maybe a young founder who's really figuring out where where customers are. Let's fast forward a little bit for a more mature company. Let's say a company's maybe in the 10
Mhm.
to $50 million revenue range. They've got revenue, they've got customers, things are happening in the market, but now the CEO wants to build their personal brand and kind of get it out there and make sure that they're a thought leader in the industry. Is there a different strategy at that level than kind of at the founder startup level?
The strategy is slightly different just because of the bandwidth of the founder typically. So when you're really early stage and you only have your first few customers, all the founder should be doing is really spending a ton of time with customers, right? Like they're typically the ones selling the software at that point, right? Like it's very early, right? And you hope in the 10 to $50 million range, like you start to have a sales team, you start to have some scale. So really looking at the founder as a strong leader of the company and making sure that the sales team and the marketing team and the CS team, right? Like I'm thinking about even product, right? Is getting all of the insights from the customers, the market, the prospects to feed into the brand of the founder. So as you were asking earlier, all this research, like how do you know where to go? Well, now you have teams on the ground that are helping build a kind of repository of a fact base, right? like I did this for the first time ever at a $200 million company. And the way that we did it is, gathering intel from the sales team, gathering intel from care and CS, and also doing a good amount of industry research ourselves to understand, annual surveys, things like that, to understand where our folks were, and then making sure that our CEO/founder was really present in all of those places and had a super differentiated opinion that people were not going to forget, right? I think what we find is, I'm talking a lot about this lately, is B2B is pretty boring, right? Like a lot of the same words are said over and over again. A lot of the same topics are talked about. They love to say you have to show ROI. It's like, yeah, well, that's table stakes at this point, right? Like you have to do that. But how can you stand out and how can you be differentiated? And a huge part of that is the person leading your company. And that's also why I love working with founders. People ask me a lot, I don't know if this is a follow-up question, but can you do this for other people in the business, right? Like, can you do this for the executives? Can you do this for other leaders? And you absolutely can. And I have done that, right? Where you build kind of a internal influencer program, right? Like your C-suite is now influencers in the market and all these things. You've seen companies like Gong do this. You've seen companies like tons of them, right? I would say they were one of the first. But the founder is the one that put their whole life on the line to solve this problem and stood in front of the train and said, like, I'm going to be here and fix every bug when I don't have a CS team and sell every deal when I don't have sales, right? And so if they aren't the most differentiated opinion in the company, then who else would be? And that's why I like working with them the best.
Yeah, so I love the way you've talked about this as like the differentiated opinion. How is that different than thought leadership? Because often we talk about content, we talk about thought leadership content, or there's brand content, or there's product content. But you kind of talked about it as this differentiated opinion, which I love. So how does that kind of fit together? And is it the same as thought leadership, or is it nuanced? There is a nuance. Is it different?
So I think because it may just be a rebrand of thought leadership, right? Like this is what I used to call it. It also used to be called executive presence. Like it used to be called like how do you get the president of your company out like to the media, right? Like it's had a lot of different iterations over the years. And the reason why I actually feel like I've brought it back to first best principle of just simply a differentiated perspective is because all of the rest of those strategies do have some connotation of like thought leadership is content marketing or executive like communications is PR. What I'm saying is like what it really is the essence of why what you do matters. And then it gets activated in lots of different channels, right? And I think that it definitely has been done in terms of thought leadership, like top of funnel, why you exist kind of work over the years. But the way that I think about it now is not just a differentiated perspective of your company, but also of your founder and why and how do those two things work together. So your company has its own brand, but so does your founder, and how they're not exactly the same. They're slightly different. And how do you activate on them in different ways? So yes, it probably just is my own rebrand of something that has existed for a long time, but I'm trying to make it even simpler because sometimes I think we like to give things words that are complex. And people don't like the idea of being a thought leader. They're like, my thoughts don't lead. I'm like, okay, well, you have a differentiated perspective, and they're all usually okay with that. So,
Well, it may be a nuance, but I think it's an important nuance. And I think it's something that CEOs will respond really well to. So I love that idea of the differentiated opinion. You talked about activating it in a number of ways. And we said, at the beginning that LinkedIn's not the only way to do it, that you really have to activate it in specific channels. But we live in an age today where there are so many channels, right? So there's the web and there's YouTube and there's Reels and there's social media platforms, right? From Instagram, Facebook, and there is LinkedIn and there are Spotify and Apple and podcast channels. How do you, if you working with a founder or CEO that wants to do maximum reach, how do you
yep.
execute on that? How do you make him or her visible everywhere? And is that easier today or harder today than it was before? Does AI play a role in making that happen? How do you kind of think about, the work of kind of getting them out there all the time?
David, this is the big question, right? I think this is something that folks have done well in the past, which is like you can go back to old school content strategy, which is like build a pillar page that is like all of your content and then break that off into a ton of stuff, right? Like that is definitely a strategy that still works. What I like to tell folks is don't get distracted from the amount of channels because the only channels that matter are the ones that matter to your customers. That's it. So for me, a good example is like I run my own business, very meta what I deal with because I do my own founder brand, right? I am my founder, I do my brand, right? And I started to produce some video content because I was just finding, honestly, I was running it as a test and I posted it on LinkedIn and then posted some on TikTok. Flopped on TikTok, did great on LinkedIn. And I was like, interesting. But the thing is, it's one piece of content. It took me 2 seconds to post it on the other channel, right? It's not like I had a whole channel strategy for each one. This may be telling me that my channel strategy is bad for TikTok, right? Which is fine. But so I had the decision to make. Do I focus on building a channel strategy for TikTok, which could have been a fine decision, or do I double down on this channel that I'm starting to see some return from? Right. And so I doubled down on LinkedIn and I decided each week I will do one TikTok test. And that's fine. That was a perfectly fine like mix for me. Right. And I think that there's a huge opportunity. You need to start to see wins too for founders to stay engaged with this work. You can't just test a bunch of stuff and tell them that 7 people saw it. Like it's not going to go well for you. So this is already a program that you have to trust in that the ROI will come. It is not, I think I talked about this on a podcast recently. Like if your founder's looking to see a UTM tracking code with a target account coming into their inbox in the next 7 days because of one post that you made, and that's defining success, you're already setting yourself up for failure. This is a long build. And that's why I like to have a mix of channels that I know that I have really great conviction in, and then running some small tests and experiments on others that feel a little bit less of a lift. I'm almost not even telling the founder sometimes I'm running those experiments because it's not relevant to them until I have some, a good bunch of data to give them.
Right. And sometimes the incremental cost of engaging in those other channels is so low that you just
Totally.
start to you know, run derivative content in those other places and you can start to make that happen. Let's talk more about the wins that the founder wants to see.
Mm-hmm.
What are those wins that they would like? So it is a long build. It's not necessarily a lead gen program, but they're investing in it for a reason. What are those reasons and what do you think they really, really get out of it?
A big part of the beginning of my engagements with folks is asking them what success looks like to them. Because often they're coming to me, right? They're saying, hey, I want to invest in my brand. I often can't sell this to somebody. That's not something like if they're not already bought in, it's pretty unusual that they will like I don't do any cold outbound. You know what I mean? Like that's not something I'm working on. So when they come to me, I say, what does success look like for you? So a great example that just makes my heart flutter is that I have a personal branding client that I work with that recently quit her corporate job and she's now building a platform called The Event Critic. And she's reviewing events, she's going to B2B events, and she's also starting her own events agency. She's activating on all those reviews she's doing, she's building that into business, right? Like a services business. So we launched her platform and we went to a big event last week. And I would say probably 80% of the people she talked to already knew that she was the event critic. And we launched it 1 week before.
Wow.
So that is yeah. And I was like, tell me you can't measure brand. Like I was fired up. I was like so excited about that, right? Because that shows that that is sticking. It is resonating with people. It doesn't, and there's a great early indicator that if we create and craft her offers properly, that will turn into revenue, right? But the first point was just to say, we want people to recognize and know that this is something she's doing, because if they're not aware, there's no way they ever convert, right? Like you have to start somewhere. And literally, we were 7 days out of the fact that she launched this, right? And so huge deal, and felt really, and she was so jazzed about it, right? Like I saw her just being like, so I think I can keep doing this. Like I can keep investing in creating content that for her right now as a solopreneur is not making her money, right? Like it's hard to invest that time instead of doing proposals and calls with clients and stuff like that. But she knows in the long run, this is what's going to build her business, right? And that's the same thing with the founder, like getting to say, like, when I did this for a CIO once, she was like, I went to my monthly meeting that I always go to. That is a group of peers that are all CIOs. 3 out of the 8 of them said, hey, I've been loving the stuff that you've been talking about. Like, I just love to hear your perspective. It's really cool to see one of our peers out there talking about, digital transformation in this way. Like, I'd love to hear more about it. And she was like, whoa, right. And those are great slides to be able to show to a board, right? Like that this is something we're trying to penetrate an executive market that is so hard to get to crack into. right? So challenging to sell into a CISO, into a CIO, into a CEO. And we're showing through peer-to-peer engagement that we're able to do it if we're super diligent about making sure that our messaging is clear, that it's repeated, that it is in the right place. And those are kind of the slides I found that a board loves to see. So happy to make them anytime.
So the investment in personal branding builds the company brand and builds the
Totally.
engagement, it's over time, right? And that's the bet that you're making, and that's really working. But it also serves the individual, right? So the individual's
Mm-hmm.
personal brand is is helped. And so if they ever leave the company or they do something else, that stays with them forever, right? So that's a powerful
Totally.
investment. When do you see the transition from thought leader, CEO of that, $10 million company, thought leader, transition into influencer? And what is that like? And is that a goal for some clients? Do they want to be influencers, or are they happy being personal branded thought leaders, or having differentiated opinions, as you call it, that are strongly held in the industry and well respected? Or do they want to transition into being influencers? And what does that mean?
A hottest word. And it is a very subjective title, right? And I think when I call someone an influencer, I think all CEOs are influencers, right? Like they influence people's buying decisions, right? Like they influence people, they have an audience, they have people that listen to them, right? I think what you're asking is when they want to become a full-time kind of content creator, like all they do is have their perspective out there. They create content, they get sponsorships, they are paid to speak places, like they kind of like a majority of their business is actually who they are and their opinions. Is that kind of what you're asking? Like if there's okay.
Yes. Yeah.
It depends. Often a founder of a software company does not want that. I have not met any of them that want to transition out of being a founder and into being, just someone on the circuit that is getting paid and sponsored. Um, I found more often it is consultants that want that, right? That are kind of building their own way of work and would love to have multiple streams of income, which is one of which being kind of influencer type work, which is, you're starting to see more and more software companies sponsor creators. Um, undisclosed, which is kind of, we could get into that later. But or not on this call, but it's another call. But you're starting to see folks getting paid by software companies to review their software. You're starting to see people getting placements in their newsletters. And that's an awesome separate kind of revenue channel. I often find that the founders really just want to put that money back into their business. So I've actually never had a conversation with a founder that wants to turn it into an influencer. I've had a good number of conversations with consultants who want to turn into influencers. Um, but a part of that is like they want to build a business that revenue comes in based on their content, right? And based on their perspective and that I think it kind of pairs alongside with consulting less well with a founder of a software company.
But if we redefine influencer as maybe the Elon Musk type influencer, millions of
Oh, got it.
followers, or for a small company, thousands or tens of thousands of followers, where your opinion matters, people listen to you, projects are coming to you, people are inviting you to be part of the conversation or the topics, or you're invited to be a speaker. Do you see founders and CEOs wanting to be at that level, to be a respected authority where everybody's listening to them and they've got thousands of followers who are interested in what they have to say?
So I'm sure some do. I'm sure, and even if they don't realize they do, they know that that's also good for their business,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like I think a lot of them begrudgingly want understand that it's good for their business. So one of my clients right now is really averse to being at the forefront. Just kind of knows that, but he has really strong and educated opinions about things that are going on in his market. So what we did is we built a subscription program, like a newsletter program, because he loves long form writing. And I think he gets super excited every single time he has more subscribers. And of course he does. Or when people come to him and say, we want you to speak at this event, because that also means his staff is not spending time pitching him, right? Like that means it's coming in, it's making his business more successful, right? I definitely think there are founders are a really special breed of person. Like they are like I call myself an absolute freak because like we want to like we think there's a different way to do things. We're really driven by our work. And I'm not even building a company, right? I'm just building I'm out on my own, right? Like helping other people be more successful, right? And I think there definitely is some ego in some of it where they want spotlight, but honestly, none of the ones I've worked with, most of them just want it so that it comes back and returns success to their business. And if it doesn't, they don't want to do it. So I'm sure there are some out there that get the validation of just like being recognized. And I think the peer-to-peer recognition is really, really inspiring to get them to keep going.
Mhm.
But I haven't found too many that are like that. But I know that they're out there. I just haven't worked with them.
Interesting. Well, that's a great perspective. We just have a few minutes left, but I wanted to save some time to ask you about
Yeah.
AI, the role of AI in this work. So, is AI helping in this work? Are you able to create content more quickly, do research? What's the role of AI tools in helping promote the founder's brand and do this kind of social media work?
For sure. There's a ton of democratization of certain content types, specifically video, right? So I'm a big fan of Descript, which is a video production platform, as well as, editing platforms like CapCut and a few others that have really created like a super, what used to be called no code, right? Way of editing video, right? And the cool thing is I have a few folks that I work with that are great on video, but aren't as great in terms of writing. And the best part is that they can send me a video that can be an asset, and then it can get completely transcribed into a transcription. So I'm using that word twice. And then you can even put that into an agent to be able to say, can you create blog content off of this based on the voice of the person in the video, right? So it's just becoming a way for folks to scale in a really amazing way. And I even find for myself, it really cut down a lot of friction in the content creation process of like I knew for a long time I wanted to start creating kind of day in the life content because I find it really I love watching it, right? And but I always was really kind of stressed about the editing process. It looked like a really and a year ago it was an absolute beast to edit a day in the life because you have probably 15 to 30 clips that are small that you have to edit together, that you have to make sure the sound quality is all good, all this stuff, right? Now I dump them all into Descript. Descript smashes them together for me. I can go through and in the transcript is where I delete words. Like I don't even need to edit the video. I go through the transcript and I delete words. It removes all my filler words. You'll notice I actually probably don't want to tell you this, but I do have a filler word I use a lot. Now you won't be able to unhear it. That I always delete from my own videos. And I have that up in 20 minutes, right? Like that is amazing, right? And is also pushing video folks to think more creatively, like to think because they're not spending 100 hours editing anymore, right? Or the quality of editing is getting even higher when you do use a person, right? Like they're doing like really cool motion graphics or really cool, which I'm not doing, but it doesn't mean I can't get my video stuff out. So I think it's making a huge difference and really cutting down the barrier to entry for folks to create content of all different types.
That's awesome. It sounds like there's so much that's going on there that allows you to leverage what you're doing in the storytelling, in the strategy, in helping get all that content out. Well, Shannon, this has been a great conversation. I really appreciate you taking the time. If people want to get to know you better, learn more about your services, what's the best way for people to reach you?
Funny enough, it is on LinkedIn.
All right.
There is. Because my program makes sense to be on that channel. So if you want to reach out to me, the name of my company is SSC Consulting, but that's really just me. So if you are a founder of an early stage software company or you work at one where you think your founder has a really cool story or you're really just looking for help in the marketing kind of front, feel free to hit me up. I would love to talk to you.
Great. We'll put all those links in the page. Thank you again for taking the time. Really appreciate it.